Chosen ones. Your name keeps coming up. Lots of people are talking about you right now. You might notice that your name travels through circles you have not yet entered. This usually happens when a person begins to live with a quiet internal alignment. When you stop performing for the world, you become a blank canvas for other people's projections. They speak about you because they are trying to categorize a type of peace they do not yet possess. This attention often feels heavy because it was never your intention to be the center of a conversation. You are simply moving through your days with a new sense of gravity. People are sensitive to weight. They can feel when someone has stopped drifting and has finally anchored themselves in their own skin. There is a psychological shift that occurs when you no longer need the approval of the group. This independence creates a vacuum that others feel the need to fill with their own theories. They discuss your motives and your history because your current stillness is a challenge to their constant movement. Most social interactions are based on a mutual exchange of masks. When you show up without one, the script is broken. This creates a lasting impression that people try to process by talking it through with others. Your name becomes a shorthand for the authenticity they are both drawn to and intimidated by. The frequency of these mentions often points to a period of transition in your own life. As you outgrow old versions of yourself, the energy you once spent on being understood is redirected inward. This shift creates a silence around you that is loud to those who are used to the noise of social compliance. They talk because they are trying to understand where the person they used to know has gone. You are witnessing the result of a boundary that was set without words. By simply being, you have established a standard that requires others to meet you at a higher level of awareness. This causes a ripple effect in your community or your workplace. People find themselves mentioning you because your presence has become a reference point for what it looks like to be truly present. When people begin to mention your name in rooms you have not entered, it is rarely about a specific achievement. It is more likely a reaction to the way you have begun to carry yourself. There is a specific type of attention that follows a person who has stopped seeking external validation. When you no longer need the approval of the group, you become a fixed point that others use to navigate their own lives. They talk because your presence demands a reevaluation of their own choices. This kind of recognition often feels heavy because it was never your intention to be a subject of discussion. You might find that people project their own hopes or frustrations onto your image. They see in you a version of the courage they are still trying to find within themselves. Your name becomes a shorthand for a certain kind of integrity that is becoming harder to find in the world today. It is a quiet form of influence that works through observation rather than persuasion. The reason the conversations persist is that you have likely broken a pattern that others are still repeating. When one person moves differently, it creates a ripple in the social fabric that everyone else can feel. They are trying to understand the source of your quietness or the reason you no longer react to the same provocations. This curiosity is not always friendly, but it is always significant. It marks the moment where you have transitioned from being a participant to being a standard. You might notice that people are coming to you with questions they used to answer for themselves. They are looking for a perspective that feels grounded in something real. This shift happens when your internal landscape becomes more stable than the environment around you. People naturally gravitate toward whatever feels solid when everything else is shifting. Your name is being spoken because you have become a source of clarity without even trying to be one. This visibility is a natural consequence of outgrowing your previous environment. When you no longer fit the old molds, people have to find new ways to describe you. They discuss you because you represent a possibility they are not yet ready to inhabit. It is a form of collective processing, where the group tries to make sense of someone who is no longer governed by the same fears as everyone else. You are becoming a point of reference for what it looks like to be truly settled. When your name is mentioned in rooms you have not yet entered, it is rarely about the specific things you have done. People are often reacting to a sense of consistency they cannot find in themselves. They notice a person who seems to move with a quiet internal compass. This creates a ripple effect where your presence becomes a point of reference for others. This attention usually stems from a psychological projection. When others speak about you, they are often trying to decode a quality they feel they have lost or never fully developed. They look for flaws to make your composure feel more attainable, or they exaggerate your strengths to justify their own stagnation. It is a way for them to process their own relationship with authenticity through the lens of your life. There is a specific kind of silence that happens when you no longer participate in the usual social performances. By simply existing without the need for constant external validation, you inadvertently challenge the unspoken rules of a group. This lack of neediness is what keeps your name in the air. It is not a matter of fame or ego, but rather the way people react to a person who is no longer easy to categorize or control. Living under this kind of quiet scrutiny requires a different type of resilience. You might find that people have formed entire opinions about your character based on a single interaction or a look. They build a narrative around you to fill the gaps left by your privacy. Managing this means learning to let those stories exist without feeling the urge to correct them. This dynamic often leads to a strange form of isolation. Even when you are surrounded by people, you become a symbol rather than an individual in the minds of those who observe you. They talk about you because you represent a possibility they are still negotiating with. It is the weight of being a living example of a different way to be. It is a strange experience to realize that your identity has become a topic of conversation in rooms you have never stepped into. This phenomenon is rarely about the specific details of your daily life. It is more about the way your stability highlights the restlessness in others. When you stop seeking permission to be yourself, you inadvertently hold up a mirror to everyone around you. Some people find comfort in that reflection, while others find it deeply unsettling. You may notice that people are suddenly careful with their words when you are near. There is a newfound hesitation in their tone, as if they are trying to reconcile the person they heard about with the human being standing in front of them. This distance is a natural byproduct of the space you have created for yourself. It is the inevitable cost of no longer fitting into the convenient boxes people use to understand the world. Staying grounded in this environment requires a commitment to your own reality. You have to accept that you cannot manage the version of you that lives in the minds of others. That version is built from their fears, their hopes, and their own limited perspectives. Your only responsibility is to remain anchored in what you know to be true about your own heart. As the noise around your name increases, the need for internal stillness becomes more practical than ever. You begin to see that being discussed is not a call to action or a reason to defend yourself. It is simply a sign that you have moved into a space where your presence is felt before you even arrive. This shift marks the end of being a passive participant in your own life. You are learning to exist in the middle of the storm without becoming part of the wind. When your name is mentioned in rooms you have not entered, it is often because you have become a mirror for the unfinished business of others. They are not necessarily discussing your specific actions, but rather how those actions make them feel about their own life choices. This creates a situation where you are present in their minds as a catalyst for their own self-reflection. You become a reference point for a standard they are trying to understand or a boundary they are afraid to set for themselves. Observing this process requires you to develop a specific kind of detachment from your own reputation. It is a shift from caring about how you are perceived to caring about how you are actually living. When you hear a rumor or a misinterpretation, you might feel a brief sting of injustice, but it is often replaced by a sense of clarity. You realize that the energy people spend discussing you is energy they are not spending on their own personal growth. This shift changes how you interact with new people, because you are no longer starting from a blank slate. You may encounter individuals who treat you with a familiarity or a caution that you have not yet earned through direct contact. Learning to navigate these interactions without becoming defensive is a vital part of your maturity. You allow them the space to realize that their preconceived notions are their responsibility, not yours to correct or confirm. This dynamic eventually forces you to become more selective with your own words. When you know that your presence carries a weight you did not ask for, you move with a higher degree of intentionality. You stop trying to manage the impressions you leave and focus entirely on the quality of your own thoughts. The noise of public opinion becomes a distant hum that no longer dictates the rhythm of your daily life. When people speak about you in your absence, they are often attempting to process their own discomfort with the unknown. Your refusal to explain yourself creates a vacuum that others feel compelled to fill with their own assumptions. You might find that the version of you living in their minds is far more complex, or perhaps more rigid than who you actually are. This discrepancy is not something you need to resolve. There is a particular strength in allowing yourself to be misunderstood while remaining focused on your own daily reality. You are essentially acting as a mirror for the insecurities and aspirations of those around you. What they see in you is usually a reflection of what they are currently struggling to find within themselves. This is why your name carries weight even in conversations where you have no personal stake. You have become a point of reference for a quality that is increasingly rare in a loud world. It is the quality of being settled. Most people are in a constant state of motion, driven by the fear of being left behind or forgotten. When they encounter someone who is not running, it forces a pause. That pause is where the talking begins. It is an attempt to rationalize why you are not participating in the same frantic pace that defines their lives. By staying still, you inadvertently highlight the exhaustion of everyone else. This creates a subtle tension that people try to diffuse by discussing your choices and your character. They are looking for a flaw or a hidden motive that would explain your composure. Accepting this role as a mirror requires a high level of emotional maturity. You have to realize that their words are not actually about you, but about the boundaries they have yet to set for themselves. The more you anchor yourself in your own truth, the less these external narratives have the power to pull you off course. You start to view the talk not as a threat, but as a natural byproduct of living a life that is no longer performative. People often project their own unfulfilled desires for change onto those who seem to have found a sense of direction. When your name comes up, it is frequently linked to a hope that someone else might finally find their way. You become a symbol of a possibility they are not yet ready to claim for themselves. There is a subtle shift that occurs when others start to view you as a reliable point of gravity. They begin to weigh their own decisions against what they imagine your reaction might be. This is not something you asked for, nor is it a role you intentionally built. It is simply the weight that settles on anyone who stops seeking external validation. You may find that people are more careful with their words when you are around. They sense an invisible standard that has nothing to do with judgment and everything to do with clarity. Your presence acts as a filter, clearing away the unnecessary noise that usually fills a social space. It can be a strange burden to realize that your mere existence requires others to be more honest with themselves. Maintaining your own path requires a certain level of indifference to this growing reputation. If you begin to perform for the version of you that exists in their minds, you lose the very thing that made you distinct. The goal is to remain a person rather than a concept. You have to keep returning to the simple, private reality of your own life, regardless of how many stories are being told about you. There is a specific kind of weight that comes with being a subject of discussion. You might find that the version of you existing in the minds of others has become more defined than the person you see in the mirror. People tend to fill in the gaps of your silence with their own assumptions. They create a character that represents what they lack or what they fear. This version of you is often more polished or perhaps more mysterious than the reality of your quiet mornings or your mundane chores. When your name is brought up, it often serves as a shorthand for a standard of behavior. You have become a benchmark for others to measure their own reactions. In a group setting, someone might ask how you would handle a difficult situation. They are not looking for a literal answer, but rather for the sense of stability they associate with your presence. Your name has become a tool for them to navigate their own uncertainty. This visibility often leads to a shift in how people approach you directly. Conversations become more careful. There is a sense that others are editing themselves before they speak to you. They are reacting to the reputation that has traveled ahead of your arrival. It can feel like you are walking into a room where the atmosphere has already been set by a version of yourself you did not create. You are left to navigate a landscape of expectations that you never personally set. The reason your name persists in these spaces is because it offers a sense of relief. In a world that feels increasingly fragmented, a person who appears whole is a rare discovery. People share stories of your consistency because it proves to them that such a state is possible. They are not just talking about you. They are trying to convince themselves that they can also find a way to be still. Your life has become a quiet proof of concept. This attention often stems from a collective search for something stable. When people talk about you, they are often building a prototype of the person they wish they had the courage to become. They take fragments of your behavior and weave them into a narrative that serves their own understanding of what is possible. This means the person they are discussing is often a version of you that only exists in their imagination. It is a curious form of projection, where your actual personality matters less than the function you serve in their internal dialogue. You become a symbol of a different path, a shorthand for a way of existing that they are still trying to name. This can feel isolating if you mistake their interest for a genuine desire to know you. Most of the time, they are not looking for a connection, but for a confirmation that their own restlessness is not the only option. You are being used as a reference point for their own navigation. Understanding this distinction helps you maintain your distance without becoming cold. It allows you to witness the chatter without feeling the need to correct the record or defend your reality. You recognize that their interpretation of you is a tool they are using to process their own lives. The narrative they create about you is usually a reflection of their own unmet needs or suppressed ambitions. When you hear your name mentioned in contexts that feel unfamiliar, it is a sign that your way of being has disrupted the usual flow of their expectations. This disruption is not something you have planned or orchestrated. It is simply the result of moving through life with a focus that is no longer dictated by the people around you. People often use your name as a placeholder for the qualities they feel are missing in their own lives. They might describe you as courageous or detached, not because you are intentionally performing those traits, but because they are wrestling with their own fears and attachments. This projection is a way for them to categorize a behavior that feels foreign to their current experience. It is often easier for a group to label an individual than it is for them to examine the source of their own internal restlessness. You may find that the stories being told about you have started to take on a life of their own. These narratives usually strip away the mundane reality of your daily struggles and replace them with a simplified version of your character. This simplification allows others to use you as a benchmark for their own progress or as a reason for their own stagnation. It is a weight that you never asked to carry, yet it remains attached to your reputation in the minds of people you barely know. There is a specific kind of freedom that comes from letting these stories exist without trying to correct them. When you stop trying to manage how you are perceived, you reclaim the energy that used to go toward maintaining a public image. You begin to realize that you cannot control the version of you that lives in someone else's mind. That version is built from their personal history and their biases, and it has very little to do with your actual presence in the world. The conversation around you often serves as a bridge for people who are not yet ready to cross into their own self-awareness. By observing you from a distance, they can test out ideas of change without taking the personal risks that come with it. Your life becomes a quiet case study for those who are still weighing the cost of living with authenticity. This means your name is often mentioned in moments of transition or doubt for other people. They are looking for evidence that a different way of existing is sustainable over the long term. As you become more comfortable with being misunderstood, you notice that your influence does not require your active participation. The less you explain yourself, the more space you leave for others to reach their own conclusions. This silence is not a tactic, but a natural result of knowing that your value is not determined by the accuracy of the rumors. People are drawn to the idea of someone who does not shift with the wind. They talk about you because you have become a reference point for stability in a world that feels increasingly fluid. This often happens when others are feeling the weight of external expectations and are looking for a way to ground themselves. They look at your choices as a way to measure the distance between where they are and where they might want to go. It is a quiet burden to be used as a yardstick for someone else's progress. You might find that people you barely know feel a sense of ownership over your story. They piece together fragments of what they see to create a narrative that helps them make sense of their own internal struggles. This is why the conversation around you often feels so detached from your actual daily experience. They are not discussing the person who deals with mundane tasks or ordinary worries. They are discussing the concept of a person who has decided to stop negotiating with their own peace of mind. This creates a strange kind of invisible gravity around your name. It pulls in those who are looking for a reason to stay firm in their own convictions. When you become a constant, you inadvertently force others to look at their own inconsistencies. This is why the talk is not always complimentary. Sometimes people speak of you with a sense of friction because your presence challenges their comfort in remaining the same. They are trying to figure out if your resolve is a sign of strength or a sign of something they have yet to understand. This scrutiny is a byproduct of living in a way that does not require constant permission from the outside world. It means that your reputation is being used as a tool for other people to navigate their own moral or emotional landscapes. You are witnessing the moment where your personal growth begins to serve a social function that you did not ask for. When you become a point of reference for others, you might feel a subtle pressure to remain consistent with the image they have created. It is easy to feel as though you owe them a version of yourself that stays within the boundaries of their expectations. You eventually learn that you are not responsible for the narrative they use to make sense of their own lives. This shift often creates a sense of separation from the social cycles you used to inhabit. You are no longer just a person in the room, but a mirror reflecting the choices others have yet to make. This reflection can be uncomfortable for people, which leads them to discuss you as a way to process their own hesitation. Most of the talking happens because internal stability is a rare currency in a world that values constant reaction. When you stop responding to every external shift, your stillness becomes a focal point for those who are still in motion. They mention your name because they are trying to decode the source of your composure. Over time, you stop listening for the echoes of your own name in the distance. The curiosity of others becomes a background noise that no longer dictates your pace or your mood. You find that the most significant developments happen in the moments when you are completely unobserved. This lack of observation allows you to experiment with your own growth without the weight of an audience. You can change your mind, adjust your path, and refine your values without needing to explain the shift to anyone else. True transformation is often a private matter that only becomes visible to the world long after the work is finished. This visibility creates a unique type of pressure that is rarely discussed. It is the pressure of becoming a standard for others without your consent. You might find that people hold you to a higher level of accountability, even in small, everyday interactions. They are looking for a crack in the foundation of the person they have built up in their minds. You may notice that people who once treated you with casual familiarity now approach you with a certain carefulness. There is a new formality in their tone, as if they are trying to reconcile the person they knew with the person others are talking about. This shift in social dynamics is often the first real sign that your internal work has reached a tipping point. The conversations happening behind your back are often focused on the things you have walked away from. People are fascinated by what we choose to leave behind, especially when those things are what society considers valuable. Your willingness to abandon traditional markers of success makes you a source of both curiosity and quiet discomfort for those still chasing them. This curiosity eventually turns into a form of respect that does not need to be voiced to be felt. You begin to sense it in the way a room changes when you enter, even if no one says a word. It is not about power or status, but about the weight of a person who has decided to stop negotiating their own truth. You learn to live with the fact that you will always be a work in progress, even while others see you as a finished product. This gap between their perception and your reality is where your true freedom lies. It allows you to keep evolving in private, while the world continues to discuss a version of you that no longer exists. This external attention often creates a subtle pressure to maintain the image others have built of you. You might find yourself wondering if you owe it to them to stay as they see you, or if you are allowed to keep changing. The reality is that your name is being used as a shorthand for a certain kind of courage that many find intimidating. When people discuss your choices, they are often trying to reconcile their own fears with the evidence of your progress. It is a form of collective processing, where your life serves as a case study for what happens when a person stops seeking permission. This can lead to a sense of isolation, even when you are the center of a conversation. You realize that the version of you living in their minds is a tool they use to measure their own proximity to change. It is not your responsibility to manage the expectations that come with this visibility. Staying grounded requires an understanding that their fascination is more about their journey than it is about your destination. You are simply the person who proved that a different path is actually walkable. This realization shifts the focus back to your own feet and the ground beneath them. It reminds you that while others are busy interpreting your life, you are the only one who has to live it. The noise of their opinions becomes a background hum that no longer dictates the pace of your breathing. You learn to accept that being a catalyst for others is a byproduct of your growth, not the purpose of it. When you become a subject of discussion, there is a risk of losing your own sense of humanity in the eyes of others. They begin to see you as a symbol of something they want or fear, rather than a person with quiet struggles and ordinary needs. This shift can create a subtle sense of isolation, because you realize people are no longer talking to you, but to the idea of you. It takes a specific kind of discipline to ignore the versions of yourself that are being built in other people's minds. There is a natural temptation to start acting out the role they have assigned to you. You might feel a pressure to always be the calm one or the person who has all the answers, simply because that is what they expect. True maturity involves rejecting the pedestal that others try to place you on. You find that the most important work happens in the moments that no one ever talks about. It is found in the way you handle a boring afternoon, or how you treat yourself. When you make a mistake that no one else sees, you eventually realize that the noise surrounding your name is mostly a reflection of the internal landscape of the people speaking. Their praise is often a sign of their own readiness to grow, and their criticism is usually a map of their own limitations. Neither of these things belongs to you, and neither should be allowed to dictate your next step. This realization brings a different kind of quiet. You stop looking for validation in the stories people tell about you, whether those stories are good or bad. You become comfortable with the fact that you are the only one who truly knows the cost of your peace and the effort it takes to maintain it. Being a subject of discussion creates a new kind of distance between you and the people you encounter. You might notice that individuals approach you with a pre-existing idea of who you are. They are often looking for a confirmation of the stories they have heard. This puts you in a position where your simplest actions are interpreted as profound statements. It can be a heavy experience to realize that your presence is no longer neutral. You become a mirror for the insecurities of others without intending to be. When people talk about your choices, they are often testing the walls of their own comfort zones. They want to see if the path you have taken is as solid as it looks from the outside. This scrutiny can feel like a burden, but it is actually a byproduct of your consistency. You find yourself moving through the world with a sense of caution that was not there before. It is not fear, but a realization that your life has become a data point for those seeking their own answers. You have to learn how to exist in that space without letting the expectations of others define your next move. The challenge is to remain authentic when you know that every shift you make is being observed by the people around you. This attention often brings people to you who are looking for shortcuts to the peace they think you possess. They see the result of your long periods of reflection and mistake it for a simple technique they can copy. You realize that you cannot give them what they want because the value is in the process, not the destination. Being the topic of conversation means you are often asked to explain things that cannot be put into words. You learn to be comfortable with the silence that follows when you cannot provide the easy answers they seek. There is a specific kind of weight that comes with being a subject of interest. It is not the same as being liked or disliked. It is the sensation of being watched for evidence. People are often looking for a reason to believe that the change they see in you is temporary. They wait for the moment you might slip back into old patterns, because your consistency challenges their own reasons for staying the same. This creates a new layer of responsibility that you never asked for. You might feel a sudden urge to defend your progress or explain how you arrived at this point. The more you try to justify yourself, the more you feed the cycle of chatter you are trying to understand. Part of the process is accepting that your public image is now a tool for others to use in their own internal dialogues. You become a point of comparison that they hold up to their own lives, and comparisons do not need your participation to be effective. You eventually realize that the version of you living in their minds is beyond your control. It is a mental construction built from their own biases, hopes, and disappointments. Trying to correct their perception is like trying to catch the wind with your bare hands. Instead, you learn to find comfort in the fact that your real life happens in the small, quiet moments that no one ever hears about. The most important parts of your journey are the ones that are too subtle to be turned into a story for others to tell. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes with being a subject of interest. When people talk about you constantly, they often stop speaking to you directly. They assume they already know your thoughts because they have spent so much time discussing your actions. This creates a barrier where you are surrounded by attention, yet you feel less understood than you did when you were invisible. the more your name is used to illustrate a point in someone else's life, the more your actual humanity seems to fade into the background. You might start to feel like an observer of your own reputation. It is a strange sensation to hear a story about yourself and realize it is only partially true. Yet it is the version everyone believes. You have to decide whether to correct the record or let the fiction exist on its own. Most people find that the energy required to manage their public narrative is better spent on their own inner work. The truth of who you are does not require a consensus to be valid. This shift often forces you to become more selective about who you allow into your immediate circle. When you know that your words might be repeated or analyzed, you naturally become more careful with your speech. This is not about being secretive or hiding, but about preserving the integrity of your personal space. You begin to value the people who knew you before there was anything to talk about. These are the individuals who see the person behind the reputation and remind you that you are more than the stories being told. The attention of others can also create a false sense of arrival. If everyone is talking about how much you have changed, you might feel as though your journey is complete. However, the inner work that brought you to this point is a continuous process that has no final destination. The noise from the outside can distract you from the subtle shifts that still need to happen within. Learning to ignore the praise is just as important as learning to ignore the criticism. You eventually find that your greatest strength lies in your ability to remain a mystery. When you no longer feel the need to be understood by the collective, you regain your freedom. The chatter will continue regardless of what you do or do not say. By allowing others to have their opinions while you keep your focus on your own path, you reclaim the power over your own time. The most meaningful progress you make will always be the parts that are impossible for others to describe. There is a subtle isolation that occurs when you become a subject of discussion. People begin to talk about you more than they talk to you. This shift alters the nature of your relationships, as others start to interact with their idea of you rather than the actual person standing in front of them. You might notice a hesitation in their voice or a carefulness in their words that was not there before. This distance creates a unique type of loneliness that is hard to describe. You are visible, yet you feel unseen. The more people claim to know about your life, the less they seem interested in the mundane reality of your day. They are looking for a narrative or a sign of something larger, while you are simply trying to navigate the same human needs as everyone else. You might also. The most difficult part of this transition is the loss of your ability to be casual in your own life. When you know that your actions are being analyzed, you might feel a lingering self-consciousness that was not there before. Every choice you make is now filtered through the knowledge that it will be reported back to people you may not even know. This often leads to a period of deep withdrawal, where you prefer your own company over the scrutiny of others. You are not hiding, but rather protecting the fragile reality of who you are becoming from the heavy expectations of the crowd. In this space, you start to see that the attention you receive is actually a form of noise that can drown out your own inner voice. The goal is no longer to be understood by the people talking about you, but to remain recognizable to yourself. You have to learn how to walk through the world without carrying the version of you that they have created. This requires a new kind of mental discipline that separates your actual experience from the stories being told. It is the practice of being the only person who knows the full truth of your day. You begin to view the chatter not as an intrusion, but as a symptom of a world that is hungry for authenticity. Instead of feeling exposed, you start to feel a sense of compassion for the people who are so focused on your path. Their obsession is a reflection of their own search for something real, and your role is simply to keep living without providing them with a performance. When you stop performing, the voices around you eventually lose their power to influence your intentions. When you become aware of the conversations surrounding you, your own voice can start to feel heavier. You might find yourself pausing before you speak, wondering if your words will confirm or disrupt the narrative others have created. This hesitation is not a sign of weakness, but a recognition that your influence has outpaced your intention. You are learning to navigate the gap between who you are and how you are perceived. The gossip or the praise often lacks the weight of your actual experience. People focus on the visible outcomes of your choices, but they rarely understand the quiet endurance required to make them. While they discuss the results, you are still living the process. This creates a physical and emotional distance between your reality and their speculation. You begin to see that their words are light, while your life is substantial. There is a natural tension between the part of you that wants to be acknowledged and the part that needs to remain authentic. You might feel a fleeting satisfaction when your name is mentioned with respect, but that satisfaction is often followed by a sense of emptiness. You realize that being a topic of discussion does not actually provide the genuine connection you are looking for. The attention is a byproduct of your movement, but it is not the destination. You eventually discover that visibility comes with a specific emotional cost. It takes energy to remain unaffected by the stories people tell about you. This energy is often better spent on the actual work of living your life. You begin to prioritize the quality of your own thoughts over the quantity of external mentions. This shift marks a move from being a character in someone else's story to being the steady author of your own. As these conversations circulate, the version of you that exists in the minds of others begins to diverge from the person you see in the mirror. You are evolving in real time, while the stories being told about you are often based on who you were months or even years ago. This creates a strange lag between your current reality and your public reputation. You realize that you are being judged or praised for a version of yourself that has already been outgrown. You also begin to notice that people use your name to settle their own internal arguments. They use your choices to justify their own risks or to excuse their own hesitations. Your life becomes a piece of evidence in a trial you never agreed to participate in. This realization can be heavy, but it also offers a specific kind of freedom. If they are going to use your image for their own purposes, regardless of what you do, you are no longer responsible for how they interpret your actions. This leads to a new level of discernment regarding what you choose to share. You start to keep the most meaningful parts of your journey to yourself, not out of fear, but out of respect for the experience. When you know that your words will be filtered through 100 different perspectives, you become more protective of your inner world. You find that the most profound shifts in your life are the ones that no one is talking about. There is a quiet power in having a private life that is far more interesting than your public one. As the noise around you increases, your internal environment often becomes more still. You learn to distinguish between the heat of public attention and the warmth of genuine self-respect. The attention is like a flickering light, while your self-respect is a steady flame that does not require an audience to stay lit. You eventually stop looking for yourself in the stories people tell. You understand that their descriptions are limited by their own vocabulary and their own life experiences. They can only see in you what they have the capacity to recognize within themselves. This realization allows you to stop correcting the misconceptions and start focusing on the truth of your own presence. You move through the world with the understanding that being known is not the same thing as being understood. People often use your name as a bridge to explain their own decisions. They might justify a sudden change in their own life by pointing to a choice you made months ago. In these moments, you are no longer a person with complex feelings, but a symbol they use to validate their own path. Your life becomes a shorthand for a specific kind of courage or a specific kind of mistake. This turns your personal history into a public tool that others pick up and put down whenever it suits them. There is a peculiar freedom in accepting that you cannot manage how you are perceived. When you stop trying to influence the rumors or the praise, you reclaim a significant amount of mental space. You learn to exist in the gap between who you actually are and who they say you are. If someone believes you are stronger than you feel, you do not have to work harder to prove them right. If they believe you are colder than you are, you do not have to perform warmth to convince them otherwise. The energy you once used to defend your reputation begins to settle back into your own body. This reclamation of energy changes the way you move through a room. You are no longer looking for a reflection of yourself in the eyes of the people around you. Instead, you become more interested in the physical reality of your own presence. The weight of your feet on the floor and the rhythm of your own breathing become more important than the distant sound of your name. This shift allows you to observe the world without feeling like you are constantly on stage. You start to notice the details of life that were previously obscured by the noise of external opinions. The texture of the air, the quality of light in a room, and the subtle shifts in your own mood become the primary focus. You find that you can be present in a conversation without worrying about how it will be retold later. The narrative others are building continues to exist, but it no longer requires your participation to stay afloat. You notice that the more people talk, the more they simplify your complexity. They turn your difficult decisions into easy victories. This creates a version of you that is convenient for their conversations, but distant from your actual experience. You realize that their version of you is static, while you are still very much in motion. This creates a specific type of pressure to perform a role you never auditioned for. When you enter a room, you can feel the weight of their expectations before a single word is spoken. They are looking for a sign that the version of you they discussed is the one that actually exists. It becomes tempting to act out the character they have created, just to avoid the discomfort of their confusion. However, you eventually learn that you cannot live in the space between their perception and your reality. That gap is where exhaustion lies. You start to recognize that you are not responsible for maintaining the mental image others carry of you. If they are disappointed by your humanity, it is because they were looking for a symbol rather than a person. You start to see that your privacy is not just about keeping secrets, but about protecting the sacredness of your own process. When people talk about you, they often treat your life as if it were public property. Reclaiming your narrative means accepting that some parts of you will never be understood by the crowd. You find a new kind of satisfaction in the things no one knows about you. This shift allows you to observe the chatter without feeling the need to participate in it. You see that their words are based on a snapshot of who you were, not who you are becoming. The more they talk, the more you realize how little they actually see of the internal work. You begin to value the quiet moments of your day more than the loud moments of their recognition.